right, we are on the heels of June 1st, and we all know what that means. The recruiting trail is about to open up once again after being closed for more than a year due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Want to welcome in Sports Illustrated All-American Director of Recruiting, John Garcia, to talk about kind of what this upcoming month means for the Ducks and for college football. Things are going to get crazy. So, John, I want to start it there. Let's just talk about what is the significance of the recruiting trail opening up again after being closed to visits and everything for so long?
Well, just put yourself in the position of a teenage recruit right now. You've got scholarship offers maybe, or you want to campaign and compete for scholarship offers, but you've been able to do none of it in person, whether it's evaluating a school, competing for that offer, what have you. So all of that will collectively change on June 1st. Official visits, unofficial visits, camp visits, camp performances, in-person evaluation, pretty much everything is going to change as far as how we see it and how these prospects are making the decisions, and also how the college coaches are going about making the decisions as to which prospects they want to prioritize, which is always important, but even more important this year, Max, because we know roster attrition, the transfer portal, extra eligibility, all of these factors are causing smaller recruiting classes every year because of the pandemic and all those other reasons. So I think those decisions are that much more critical for this class of 2022, and the in-person impressions both ways will tell a lot of the story.
I want to keep it there for a second. You talked about prioritizing certain recruits. We saw all the recruiting go digital. Recruits' phones are blowing up every day. What do you think, how difficult do you think it was for coaches to kind of say, hey, I only got this, kind of limited batch to bring in here, and, going about like, hey, I need to get this kid on campus as soon as possible. And what do you think those kind of decisions were like?
Max, we've talked to dozens of coaches really at every level, and a lot of the answers overlap with one another. I think when you're talking about evaluating a prospect, there's only so much you can do digitally. You want to get eyes on a prospect, and a lot of times you want to coach the prospect. These prospect camps are an opportunity to see what you're going to get for the next 3, 4, 5 years, sometimes even more. So that hands-on experience was really missed by coaches. But I think the most common thing we heard in terms of what the pandemic did was it eliminated the verifiables. A lot of these coaches are sort of judged and graded by the recruiting they can do when it comes to off the field and off season, criteria. So when you're not able to eyeball a kid and say, hey, this kid is 6'4", 225, because you measured him at your own facility, those are the types of margins where a lot of coaches feel like their job hangs in the balance. So you could understand why not being able to verify a lot of these things was really stressful for everybody during the pandemic, and relying on technology helped to a degree, but any coach will tell you that in-person evaluations and being there and feeling it, there's no substitute for that. You couldn't sit on the sidelines and watch a prospect's body language. What kind of teammate was he? Was he a leader? What was he like when he didn't get the ball or when something bad happened on his team? You couldn't find all of those verified and then intangible things that really separate one prospect from another.
Yeah, certainly going to be big for them to get eyes on them in person, like you were saying. Maybe an aspect of recruiting that maybe goes a little bit, unheralded or just not, valued as much by some fans that don't follow recruiting too closely. Fortunately for the Ducks, if we're looking at their class, they have a pretty good start for the class of 2022. Right now, they currently hold the top spot in the Pac-12 recruiting rankings. So just kind of want to get some of your thoughts, John. What do you think about this group that Mario Cristobal has together at this point?
As you mentioned, Max, this group is going to open up as the top 20 class for us at SI. The numbers are okay. I think you're seeing across the board a smaller number of prospects from a volume perspective. I think the most commitments for any program at this time is at 13, and that's Notre Dame and LSU. Oregon is sitting at 8, with a typical Oregon class to date, very national. The Ducks are a national brand. Mario Cristobal brings a Southern pedigree, but that brand has always been a national brand. So you do see some local talent, but you've got California, Alabama represented with Tanner Bailey, who I know we'll talk about here soon. The Ducks will make a splash in Florida and Texas like they always do. So it's a typical Oregon class from a geographical standpoint. And then positionally, you love what they're building with. You want to build with premium positions. We mentioned Bailey at quarterback. You've got an offensive tackle already committed and multiple defensive backs. So I think the foundation is there. You want to attack the defensive line a little bit more and build out the rest of the offensive line. But I think to date, Oregon's done a good job. And we know once prospects get on campus in Eugene, see Outson Stadium, the whole nine, the commitment list will grow. I think that's safe to say.
Yeah, only 8 guys right now, but Mario Cristobal, since he's taken over at Oregon, he's done, we don't have to say it too many times. He is an ace recruiter, and he does his heavy lifting in the summer. That way you can focus on the season when it comes around. And then, by the time the early signing period or even the second signing period comes around, you're just focusing on those heavy hitters, those 5-star guys that like to draw it out a little bit more. You talked about Tanner Bailey. Let's stay on him for a bit here. Alabama guy, quarterback for the Ducks here in 2022. When we're looking at recruiting, I think one of the big points for any program is you want to get that quarterback in the fold as soon as you can. Fortunately for Oregon, they were able to get Ty Thompson on campus literally the last weekend before the pandemic shut everything down. And then he hopped on board, and, we saw what happened after that. Elite talent wanted to join him, 3 All-American wideouts. I mean, just talk about Bailey and kind of, maybe if you think that we'll see some kind of domino effect now that he's on board.
As you mentioned, Max, really hard to follow up an All-American quarterback like Ty Thompson, a top 5 quarterback for us at SI in that 2021 class, and SI 99 member. So doing it with a Tanner Bailey is really interesting to me. I think Tanner brings an interesting element to this class. Oregon's gonna make a splash in the South, in Alabama, as we mentioned, but just from a prospect perspective, this is going to be a 4-year high school starter, which no matter where you play is not easy to do. And there's so many tangible things to like about Bailey over those 4 years. Every year he's increased his yardage. Every year he's increased his touchdowns. And most importantly, every year he's increased the amount of wins at Gordo High School, led them to a state championship game appearance just this past year, despite the pandemic. And watching that game, I actually watched the entire thing, going up against a really good Hanley team that had an SI 99 guy rushing the passer, and Dylan Brooks, who's now at Auburn. Bailey was really on the move the entire game. He was sort of beaten up. And what the numbers and that progression don't show is his toughness. It doesn't show his athleticism to escape the pocket. And oftentimes in that game, make the throw stepping into a defender, an SEC defender, coming downhill at you. So I think there's some intangibles there to really like about Bailey. He's a really good athlete, a good baseball player in the state of Alabama. But when he does focus on football, he can do his thing at quarterback. He's not going to blow you away with pure athletic traits or his measurables, but he has a classic release, an easy release. He can get the ball out quickly. We mentioned the game experience. That creates just a comfort when it comes to progression passes, getting rid of the football, and taking what the defense gives him, which is, as we get in this pass happy, crazy, evaluation of quarterbacks and offenses, the guy who gets the ball to the right person and plays a little bit of point guard on the football field, there's still something to be said for that. And Bailey has become a master at that over his 3+ years at Gordo High. So I'm a big fan of him, and I'm a big fan of him beyond what you can see on a player profile page, 6'1", 190, forget the stars, all that stuff. I think Bailey brings an intangible to Oregon, a toughness that you want when you go recruit in SEC country.
Bailey going to be joining a pretty loaded quarterback room right now. Anthony Brown looking like the presumed starter at this point, but who knows, things could change in fall camp. You got Robbie Ashford, another Alabama guy, already on the roster, and he really turned some heads in the spring game. So we've talked about Bailey. Want to talk about some other guys that are in the fold here. You talked about how Oregon's had some local kids hop on early here. Safety Trajan Williams and Marion Winston from the Portland area. Want to get some of your thoughts on them. And then maybe just talk a little bit more about the importance of locking down, your home state, especially given that Oregon isn't really known for producing a lot of high-end talent.
Yeah, the Ducks recruit nationally as well as just about anyone. But if you've got legitimate Pac-12 talent at home, you've got to secure that too. Obviously, Justin Herbert is sort of poster child for that, and it may never get better than that. But when there is good enough local talent, and we see this with USC, Alabama, Ohio State, Clemson, when there is great local talent, despite that national profile, you got to lock them down. And Oregon does a really good job with this so far in the class of 2022. Gotta love Trajan Williams. He's just a football player. I talked about intangibles with Bailey. Well, with Williams, it's tangible. You can see it. There's no secrets there. He's a three-phase player at his high school. He's a receiver. He's a safety. He's a special teams player. But really, he's an impact player, no matter where he lines up. And he can hang in all three phases, but there's no doubt that he belongs in the secondary. 6 foot, 200 pounds, just a ball hawk. He can play downhill. He's comfortable in the box. If you like football in any era, he's a defensive player you want on your team. And I think he's got safety and nickel upside in the Pac-12, and that versatility will be very key because obviously we all know, in the Pac-12, you got to deal with a lot of passing. So I think that's a really key get for the Ducks. And then I think, with Winston, he's got Pac-12 bloodlines all over the place. He's more of a floor player. He's a defensive lineman that you watch, and you just like what he does well. And at a minimum, he's going to be able to seal the edge up front, rush the passer a little bit. I think what's interesting with him at 6'3", 260, 255 or so, where does his frame take him at the next level? If he's so comfortable and under control on the edge, does that make him more of an inside guy if he continues to put on weight? I think that could be his home at the end of the day. But if he stays a bit trim, Max, I think he can be your classic and sort of safe, high floor edge prospect where you're going to get some pass rushing, but you're going to get discipline, you're going to get body control, and a guy who understands leverage. He's not the best athlete on the football field, but he makes the best football play. And I think for every exciting athlete, you have to have that counter who's just going to do his job, fill the role, and be a glue guy for